morning or good afternoon actually, and welcome to this shir. And we'll be looking about the halachas of challah. So let's take a look first of all in the Alter Rebbe's Shulchan Aruch, and here this is in Hilchos Shabbos. We just learned it a couple of weeks ago in the men's shir. So I'm looking at Seif Yud Beis. Noyagin lolush kedei shiur challah kol echad bebeisoi. It is customary for each person to make their own quantity of challah, to knead a quantity of challah at home. Last is mehem lechomim, to make from that dough, to make loaves. Libtsoya alehim b'Shabbos, to break bread from them on Shabbos. Whereas let's say the weekdays it would be normal to buy bread from the local bakery, from the bread shop, but on Shabbos, for Shabbos rather, it's a minhag to make your own loaves. This is an expression of our honoring Shabbos and Yom Tov, to make our own loaves. One shouldn't depart from the minhag. So of course, this is where many Yiddish housewives will make a point of making their own challahs. That doesn't mean that there's no challahs on sale at Brzezinski's and all the other Jewish bakeries, but there is certainly a hidur here to make your own challahs for Shabbos. So now, what I'm going to start with is, he uses these words of shiur, kedei shiur challah. How much is a shiur challah? Now, there is a variety of opinions about this, and in the Litvische Welt, they talk about 5 pounds of flour. Now, when we talk about quantities, you may often see there's a mention of Reb Chaim Noah and the Chazon Ish. Chazon Ish, they were contemporaries, lived about 60 years ago. Chazon Ish took, in many issues, he took a very strict opinion, and when he comes to shiurim, he very often almost doubled the shiur. Because the shiurim are based upon, let's say, the size of an egg, and how many eggs. A shiur challah would be 43 eggs, approximately. So he maintained that the eggs nowadays are much smaller than the eggs which were in the times of the Chachamim, and therefore you have to have a much larger amount. Okay, that's his opinion. But Reb Chaim Noah, who was incidentally a Lubavitcher Chassid, he lived at the same time, and he really specialized in this concept of shiurim, of quantities, and he's really confirming what's the much more widely accepted shiur, and which is saying that the eggs which we have are pretty much the same. Of course, the eggs can vary a little bit large size, but pretty much this is the egg which Chacham are talking about. Now he comes up with a shiur. Now I want to share with you a simple. If you have the Lubavitch cookbook, you see the Spice and Spirit cookbook, the mauve one, it's the second edition. So on page 48, it has the amounts for challah. So we've got a level where we don't have to separate challah at all. A smaller amount of flour, and need not be mafresh challah at all. Then you have an amount where for sure you have to be mafresh challah, in which case you'd say a bracha, and in between we'll have an amount which is just l'chumra. And one's mafresh challah, but one doesn't make a bracha. So what we have here is, if it's less than 2 pounds 11 ounces, or in grams less than 12 pounds, 1,230, in other words, 1 1/4 approximate kilo. If it's less than that, no bracha, no hafroshas challah. Sorry. What they write here, between 1230 and 1666.6 grams, or between 2 pounds 11 ounces and 3 pounds 11 ounces. It's a suffix, so you should separate challah without a bracha. To be able to make a bracha, so it has here 1666 grams or 3 pounds. 11. So this is yeah, so just a little bit more than, a little bit less than 4 pounds. You can work that out. I'm sure you know better than me how to work that out. But there we have it. If it's 3 pounds and every 11, 10 ounces, 10 approximately 3 and 3/4 pounds would be, you can be mafresh challah with a brach. Okay. How much challah do you have to separate? How much, the piece which you separate, how big that should be? So the minhag is to be mafresh a kazayas. A kazayas, generally to know, imagine the size of the small cups which you use for mashke, they call them in English medicine cups, or imagine the size of a matchbox. Regular Bryant and May average 49 content matchbox. Approximately that is the size of what we call a kazayas. Approximately that would be the amount of dough you'd separate from the main dough in order to be Mekayim mitzvahs challah. At what point do you say the bracha? So generally, when it comes to mitzvahs, kol birchas mitzvahs should be over lasiyasan, should be prior to doing the act of the mitzvah. And therefore, if you've separated the challah, you've done the mitzvah, so to speak, why are you making the bracha now? On the other hand, you want to make the bracha as close as possible to the act of the mitzvah. And therefore, what you should do is hold the pinch that piece of challah which you want to separate, hold it in your hands, it's still attached to the main body of dough. You'll say your bracha, and after having finished the bracha, you'll pull away that piece. And many have the meaning to say harei zeh challah, harei zeh challah. The piece of challah which we separate from the dough cannot be eaten. In the original mitzvah was obviously that it should be given to a kohen, and the kohen would then use it. But the kohenim, unfortunately, like all of us, are tomei, because all of us have been somehow or other in contact with a mace, with a person who had died, or other forms of tumah. We do not have the pora aduma today, the ash of the pora aduma, so that process of purifying from tumas mace is not available to us. So we consider ourselves all to be tomei, and therefore the dough which we touch has become tomei. And like we have by korbanos, if something sacred had become in contact with something with tumah, it can't be processed in the normal way, it can't be eaten, and therefore it has to be burnt. So imagine we have here this piece of challah has now got a certain kedusha to it. It's a disqualified kedusha, so we can't eat it and we have to burn it. Because of this kind of interesting situation, it's got a kedusha to it. Therefore, be careful it doesn't get mixed up with the rest of the dough. So when it comes to burning the challah, we make a point of burning the challah on its own, not together with other food. So if you have something baking in the oven, to put the challah in the oven and it's going to share the vapor, etc., with the rest of the food, that shouldn't be done. You shouldn't be burning the challah together whilst other stuff is baking. You could burn it in the oven when nothing else is there. You could do that. In the cookbook, they recommend to put the challah in the grill, so it's going to get burnt without affecting anything else, any other equipment. Obviously, you put a piece of silver foil underneath it. They shouldn't share its taste with the grill, which you may want to use for other food. If you live in Stamford Hill, you have a facility outside 140 Stamford Hill, and you can post your piece of challah, and some fine souls are going to be taking your piece of challah along with many others and burn it. So a lot of people nowadays feel uncomfortable to burn their own challah, so they've provided this service. And if you do use that service, I get no commission from this, but there is a slot to put in some money as a contribution for the service. Okay. Now, I've had this more than once, especially now in the lockdown situation. I'm sure sometimes people make an activity with the children to join in making the challahs. And it's happened more than once that little Sarah has been playing with the dough, and all of a sudden the piece of challah which is separated has disappeared. Where has it gone to? Obviously, it's got into one of your nice loaves. So what do you do now? You've got here a piece of challah which is sacred. It should have been burnt.
Hello.
It should have been burnt.
Yeah, hello. He's giving you shit. You want to call back in an hour?
And now it's almost like you have a bit of tray for food, which is mixed in because you're not allowed to eat it, and now it's mixed in with all the rest of the food. So what do you do? So if it's a computer, you can press Control Z, yeah? You can go press undo, you can go back. But how do you undo the kedusha of the challah piece, which is now comfortably snuggled in with all the rest of the dough? So there is a solution, and that is that because how did it become sacred? Through your declaration. When you said Hareza Challah, or even if you didn't, but it was your making it. So that's similar to the idea of a neder, and the Torah does allow the concept of hatoras nedorim. It's mentioned in Pirkei Avos. Hatoras nedorim is parparoim. At any rate, there is a solution of hatoras nedorim. So if you did have this problem, that your piece of challah got mixed in with the rest of the dough, what would be needed would be, sorry, the pun on the word needed, what you should be doing somehow is getting a group of three men together, and you'd say, you can get your husband to say on your behalf that this was what happened. We would like to undo that declaration, and they would say mutalach, 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 and it will be, that's the undo button. And now the challah, the status, the kedusha of that piece of challah has been reversed. It doesn't have kedusha anymore, and now you'd be mafresh challah once again, and you'd make a bracha again. Now we have a home-proven solution to avoid this problem. Is as soon as you mafresh the challah, take it and put it in. You probably have an empty bag from flour. Take that piece of challah and put in other words, a sacred piece of challah, put it in the empty bag of flour, put it to one side, and like this you will avoid this risk of one of your helpers mixing it back in. Actually, this shiloh, which I told you about, the piece of challah disappearing into the rest, I got it it was on a Friday, and it was from someone on shlichus in a small place where they didn't have necessarily 3 frum yidden to be able to do hatoras nedorim. So then we had the question: can you get 3 men over the phone to make can you make a Zoom hatoras nedorim? It was before Zoom was invented. It's about 20 years ago. But my impression is that you could actually deal with it over the phone also if you have 3 people together, and you could say the hatoras nedorim, and they could do the hatoras nedorim over the phone. I don't have obviously sources to support this from 500 years ago, before phones were invented, but there is actually discussion in Poskim. Can you do hatoras nedorim by letter? And instead of having to the petitioner come and stand in front of the 3 rabbonim, could they send a letter? And I felt that there was enough grounds to be mako to allow hatoras nedorim over a phone also. Okay. Now, yes, it was again a home experience. It was like about 5 minutes before Lichtsinden, and we realized that our challah is still sitting in a nice pile in a bowl. It was a pile of dough. So we quickly shaped them into little loaves, put them into the oven, And that week, I stayed a little bit longer at home. And during the 18 minutes where ladies are machmir, they machmir Kabbalah Shabbos earlier, and the men take the liberty. I usually don't take that liberty, but this week I was a little desperate. And so during that 18 minutes, they managed to bake, and so we had challah for Shabbos. But then what we realized on Shabbos is that we have forgotten to be mafresh challah. So now here we are at that situation. You have hafroshas. What do you do if you realize on Shabbos, oops, I wasn't mafresh challah? So here's the difference between Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. If it's in Eretz Yisrael, you have a problem. You can't eat from your challahs. But the good thing is that you probably have a neighbor who has got some spare challah. But in Chutz La'aretz, the halacha is, I'm going to say the words in Hebrew, oichel v'hoylech v'achakach mafrish. Challahs Chutz La'aretz is not as strict, and you are allowed to partake of that batch of dough and do hafroshas challah later. So let's go through this again. We quickly baked this stuff Erev Shabbos, and then on Shabbos we realized we hadn't taken challah. So we put aside instead of eating up all the challahs on Shabbos, we put aside one challah. There's not challah. We could put about one small loaf, small, big, whatever. We'll put about one loaf. Motzah Shabbos, I go over to that loaf and I break off a piece. And before that, I say the bracha, shekachon b'misvesa v'tzivonu, and that's okay. So although we've eaten from it, that's okay. Oichel v'hoylech v'achakach mafresh. Now I'll explain to you something. In the kosher bakeries, the people who work through the night are not necessarily the fellows who daven 3 times a day and wear Rabbeinu Tams. Often you actually have goyish chefs, whatever, who are working inside the bakery. So what happens if I come to one of these all-night open bakeries? I come to the bakery at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I buy a loaf of bread. Mama's geschmack, it's freshly baked, still warm. When was challah taken? So the answer is that the way this works in the bakeries, the commercial bakeries, with the hashgacha, from every batch, let's say they've got their set, their seder, that every night they know that they have to make so many batches of dough, of wholemeal and this and that, of all different types of recipes, different types of bread, and from every batch which they prepare of dough, every batch of the they prepare, they take a lump and they put it on a tray. So there's a tray with numbers, let's say, and this is from batch 1, and like this, the mashgiach comes, let's say, 6 o'clock in the morning, and he sees there's a tray there with 12, 15 lumps of dough. Each one is from a different batch. He will then take challah for that, for all of the batches which were needed through the night. So this again would be acceptable in Chutz La'aretz. As I said, the principle in Chutz La'aretz is that you are allowed to eat from a batch of dough, even though challah has not been separated, relying upon that challah will be separated later. This would not work in Eretz Yisrael, but the flip side of it is that probably the fellow who's working through the night is a Shomer Torah mitzvahs, and he is able to be mafresh challah through the night, and therefore that problem is solved both ways. Right, now, does the din of mitzvah hafroshas challah apply to cakes? Usually, if you're making at home one sponge cake or something, it's not going to be using 3.5 pounds of flour. Unusual. In addition, there is in the Tzemach Tzedek, he has a long tshuva discussion about this, where he justifies the minhag. He says the fact that the minhag is people make lekech and they don't take challah, he says it's okay. He justifies the minhag of not taking challah from something like a lekech, which is very sweet, not even a dough, it's a batter, whatever you call it. If you make a larger amount, there may be room for being mafresh challah, but as I say, the Tzemach Tzedek does condone to a degree the minhag of not taking challah from lekach, which is honey cake. If you make a more a proper dough, it might be a little bit like a sweet dough, but if it's like a proper dough which you need, then you should be mafresh challah, even though perhaps it's going to end up as a mazonas dough. But it's a proper dough. It should be mafresh challah. Now, what's this business of covering the baked goods with a cloth? So let me explain to you something. In the matzah bakeries particularly, they don't do hafroshas challah from the dough. If you've ever been to a matzah bakery, you see the tremendous haste that they're working to get those matzahs into the oven and baked within 18 minutes. So they don't stop to be mafresh challah. What they do instead is between each shift, a shift can be 18 minutes or half an hour, whatever it may be, I don't remember the details. So then you've got next to the oven, the one who takes out the matzahs from the oven, one by one, he's got this big pallet, whatever you call it. Yiddish, it's called a shiver. So the fellow, he takes each matzah and puts it carefully onto this trolley, or whatever counter, which is near the oven, outside the oven. And now, once a whole shift is finished, let's say there'd be 100 matzahs there or more. So then you can be mafresh then for that whole batch. So they're being mafresh challah not before the baking, although that's the normal minhag. In the rest of the time, we would be mafresh challah from the dough rather than from the baked goods. But if you didn't, in this case, it's justified why you didn't, then you could be mafresh challah from the ready baked foods. And so that's what they would do. Or they can even leave it for later, that when they have, after a few hours, they've got stacks of matzahs, and there'll be mafresh challah from all of them. And so in order for all of these separate loaves, in this case separate matzahs, in order for them all to become counted as a one unit, so here we have this idea of if they're all in one basket, so the basket makes them all into a single unit. That's called, in Hebrew, it's called siruf sal. The basket has combined them. As an alternative to using a basket, that they're all inside the basket, if they're all covered over with one cloth, that also acts to take all of the separate loaves, smaller loaves, to make them now into one batch, and one hafrosha can be done for all of it. Now let's explain this a little bit more. Let's say you made 2 or 3 smaller batches, each one, let's say, of 2 pounds. And now you want to be mafresh challah once for all of them. Let's say you made some mazonas bread, or you made some whatever it may be, and you want to make one hafroshas challah for all of them. So here, if you put them all into one basket, or you'd cover them with a cloth, then you can be mafresh challah once for all of the various doughs which you have there, or breads which you have there. Now, I want to address some, since I just spoke about several small batches. What about someone asked me this: can I make a large batch of dough, let's say of 6, 10 pounds, whatever, and divide it? And I want to put half into the freezer, and I'll be able to make next Friday. I'll take it out, or Thursday. I'll take it out from the freezer, and I'll be able to make another fresh loaves for Shabbos, instead of having to mix up a dough and getting all the equipment dirty. So that's what works for them. Okay, so can you do this to separate challah twice? My impression that shouldn't be done, and that's because of brocha she'eino tzricha. You shouldn't be creating a need for a separate brocha, as if you say, I've got an apple, and I eat a bite, and then I put down the apple, come back, oh, I got another bite, another bite. So if that's what you're, that's what you, in some circumstances that might be justified. That's, you only wanted a half an apple. But if you have the opportunity to cover the full batch of dough with one hafrosh chal, with one bracha, to separate it into two batches, one for today, one for tomorrow or next week, would be kind of creating a bracha hashem tzrichos. It's better actually. You shouldn't do that. You should just have take one hafrosha and then you put it in the freezer, and if you want, put on a sticker to say that challah has been taken. Now, what I'm hearing, shilas coming up recently, is a lot of people are making two types of dough. Let's say a wholemeal and regular white or spelt or whatever it may be. They're making, let's say, 2 pounds of this and 2 pounds of that. And they're asking the shilah, can you separate challah? Can you do the mitzvah of hafroshas challah when you've got two smaller amounts, each one less than the shear? So the rule, the way it's written in Shulchan Aruch, is that if the two doughs, it depends on yourself. Are you makbid? Would you be upset if one touches the other? Sometimes you've got someone who's extremely sensitive to a particular type of dough, and therefore you are particular that these two doughs should not touch one another. If that's the case, then they will not combine to the 2 and 2 pounds, 2 pounds and 2 pounds will not combine to one shear. But if you're not so fussy, and you don't mind if the two doughs will touch, especially if they actually are touching, so then you could separate challah, one piece of challah for the two. They're both dough, they're both made from wheat or barley or spelt, whatever it may be, and they're sitting together, they're touching one another. Then you can separate one piece of challah for both of them. What's come up also, another shilah has come up recently, which where people make one batch of dough, let's say of 4 pounds of dough, 4 pounds of flour rather. Once it's made into dough, it's probably heavier because you add the water. But they don't want to use all of it in bread. Let's say you don't have the need in your family to go through that amount of white challah over a Shabbos. And so what do? It's a little bit more than your requirements. Let's say for the rest of the week, you're keeping to brown bread or your whatever it may be. So some people want to take this sheer challah and take, let's say, half of it or a third of it and use it and make it into kokosh or babka, whatever you want to call it. Apparently, to make kokosh, it's the same dough. It's a challah dough. It's just that you roll it out flat and you put in some chocolate and cinnamon. I'm not going to tell you any more details of the recipe because I don't know. And then you roll it up and you bake it. You egg it before that, and it becomes kokosh. Yeah, sounds very simple. So now you've taken one batch of dough. Part of it you've made into bread, and part of it you made into kokosh. Is that a problem? Now there has been in the various magazines, the Jewish magazines, there has been mention that that you cannot make a bracha when you do this. So I spend a lot of time looking into this, and I've written about this. The source of this chumrah is from the Chazon Ish, where he says that because you're taking this dough and you're going to divide it into two separate recipes, therefore it's as if it's already divided, and therefore you cannot take challah with the bracha. I'm looking around. His basis is very scant, and based upon the Tzemach Tzedek, I'm quite confident that it's okay to, despite the fact you're going to divide into two recipes, at the moment it's one dough, and you can make a bracha and hafroshas challah regardless. I'm showing you, I have in just a new journal which has been published here in London. It's called Pa'olim LaTorah. I wrote up about this, and in this newest issue, which is Nissan Tov Shin Pei, I have published my article about this, where to say that That it's the fact that you're going to make it into separate batches of dough, separate recipes, is not a reason not to be mafresh challah with a bracha. So at least for Chabad, we're following Tzemach Tzedek, I'm okay to say that you can, even though you're going to divide it into bread, challah and two kokosh, at the moment it's still one dough, and you'd make a bracha when you mafresh challah. Let me a little bit, perhaps now. Pardon? Yes. So now I want to address what's become very popular in the last, let's say, 6 years, about these mega challah bakes, etc. And here also I have written about this, and it's been published in English and in Hebrew. What were the concerns about this? The concern is that if I make a batch of dough with a clear intent that I'm not going to keep all of it, I make a batch of dough of 4 pounds, and I'm going to give 2 pounds to someone else in dough form. I'm going to bake it, it's a different story. If I make 4 pounds of dough and I'm going to give away 2 pounds of dough to someone else, then because my intention was to separate it to separate owners, so it's as if even as I had this batch of 4 pounds of dough, it's as if it's already been separated, and I cannot be mafresh challah with a bracha. So this raises the question with all of these, these challah baking groups, where each lady is given, let's say, a pound of dough, and she's going to make 1 challah or 2 challahs. So I'm making a large batch of dough with the intention that Mrs. Cohen will have a small piece, and Mrs. Levy will have a small piece, and Mrs. Israel will have a piece, and Mrs. Benjamin will have a piece, and everyone is going to have a piece, but each one is going to have less than a shir challah. So then we cannot take challah here, we cannot fulfill the mitzvah of challah, because it's seen as if this 15-pound batch of dough is as if it's already divided into 15 owners, whatever it may be, and each one is less than a shir challah. So that's where we have a problem. To be able to be mafresh challah, you have to have that one person is going to go away, is going to remain the owner of a shir challah, or that's, as you said, about 3 3/4 pounds of flour. That will remain. So you can do this, that you have a whole group, and one person, let's say the leader of the group, is going to keep a shir challah for herself, and she'll give everyone else, she'll give them small amounts. She will make a bracha because she is keeping a shir challah for herself. But for everyone else to make a bracha, that would not be okay, because they're having less than a shir challah. I know that in some places they wanted that each woman should make her own bracha, and they were giving every lady was given a bag of flour and a bowl, and to mix it from the dough and all the way through, which is a wonderful thing. What they did, they relied on the smallest shear, let's say about 3 pounds. They gave each one about 3 pounds, which is, according to some, that's already enough. So they went down to the very smallest shear and gave each lady a shear challah. And okay, then obviously that means they didn't just have 2 loaves, they would have more than 2 loaves, which they would go home with. And then they could have each one with making a bracha. But to give each one less than the shear and having them making a bracha, that would not be okay. Okay, I've kind of gone through my notes. If anyone wants to ask any questions, if you have any questions, you can either send them into a chat, or you can unmute yourself, and you can, otherwise we'll just, if there's no questions, then we'll finish the shir a little bit early. Okay, everyone's happy?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
In school, a lot of times in school, when you want to bake challah with the children, you take one one batch of challah. Are you not allowed to take challah from that because you're giving each individual child a piece of challah, which they're going to shape themselves and then maybe take home to bake?
That's a good question. The question really is, well, I'm trying to analyze the question. Do they own when you give it to them, do they own it? Or let's say,
I suppose so.
Just a second, yeah. In a nursery,
Sorry?
I went through. Let's say I had the same question for a nursery, and I was quite confident to say that when the auntie gives each child a piece of dough, that the child did not coin it, and therefore, and then they bake it in school, and therefore it would be okay to take challah with a bracha. But if, let's say, you're giving each child, first of all, if you're giving each child a piece of challah and they're going to take it home in a disposable tin, then no bracha. Or are you baking it in school?
No. Let's say we don't bake it in school.
Then you shouldn't be making a bracha.
Okay.
Or unless you make a large amount of dough, in which you and you'll keep for yourself a shir challah, then that would be okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, please?
Go on.
I just want to confirm, so if I'm making a big challah dough, let's say I'm making 6 pounds of dough at once, and some of it's challah and some of it's yeast cake, yeah? Is that okay? So I just take one lot of challah, is that right?
Yes.
Fine. Sure, thank you very much.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
All right. I wish you all Zeit alle gesund well and look after yourself.
Is it recorded?
It should be.
I missed out the part about Israel, something in Eretz Israel.
All right.
I missed out part of it.
Yeah, and all who need a refuah shlema should be healed. I'm just thinking the word challah is also similar to the word of lahachlim, which means to heal, and it should be a refuah. All the challahs should be a refuah for all the cholim, and they should be we should all be reunited in peace and in happiness culture.
Amen.
Amen.